successfully prosecute violent crime. And what reform means is that the city does not, and this office does not, waste its time or limited resources because of a lack of focus on the crimes that matter most. The city cannot afford to fail to accurately combat this current crime surge. We cannot let ego and politics get in the way of safety. Yesterday, the chief said that he believes, speaking from a law enforcement perspective, that he is making the arrest, and the NOPD's job ends there. That's just not the way that law and justice works. It's not what law and order requires. Number one, we are all law enforcement. On your way up here today, you might have seen some people in suits and ties. They may not be in uniforms, but they are law enforcement. We have to be partners in delivering justice for victims, which means we need officers, after an arrest has been made, we need them coming to court, testifying. We need them in this room speaking before the grand jury. We need them following up on important and relevant leads so that there is enough evidence presented to an Orleans Parish jury to get a successful conviction. Now, yesterday, a city spokesperson said that they are 100% behind the chief. We all are. We have to be. I am. We are in a fight for the safety of this city together. But then that same spokesman went on to dispute the number of acceptable cases because of a difference of about 7%. That's a problem. That's a problem because that's the equivalent of rearranging furniture in a burning house, disputing 7%. That number, the acceptance rate, that is not the issue. The number that matters to the people of this city, the number that matters to actual public safety, is how frequently the NOPD makes an arrest and solves a case when a citizen is victimized. Let me repeat that. The most important number that is critical to public safety is how frequently the NOPD makes an arrest and solves a case when a citizen is victimized. Now, although many of the chief's recent statements blame this current surge of crime on other sectors of the criminal legal system, the FBI data on NOPD's performance on actually solving crime paint a very different picture. The FBI data for 2020 states that the NOPD only solved 30% of murders, 35% of armed robberies, and only 8% of car thefts. The only way to combat this current crime spike is to make arrests for these violent crimes. That percentage has to go up from 35%, 30%, and 8%. That is the simple truth. That is the math. Let me be crystal clear here. This is in no way an indictment of the hardworking women and men of this police department. They are going above and beyond to do everything that they can. So this is not an indictment of their work or of their effort, but this is how they are being deployed and what they're being told to prioritize by leadership. And if Chief Ferguson is at all concerned around these numbers, 30% solve rate and an 8% solve rate when it comes to car crimes, he's got to take that up with the FBI. These are not my numbers. Because this solve rate is critical to making this city safer. It's not something to bicker about. It's not something to have hurt feelings about. It is an accurate diagnosis, right? If you've got cancer, you want your doctor to diagnose cancer. You don't talk about your foot. Now, there is a fair amount of misinformation swirling about this office's policies. So I want to spend a few minutes setting the record straight on what we have done in this first year and what our policies actually are. During my administration, the Orleans Parish DA's office has been and will continue to be focused on violent crime in this city. And something I really want to make really clear here that I think is really missed in this conversation, locally and nationally. Unique times call for unique measures. And this office is focused on finding solutions instead of finger pointing and blaming other criminal legal system actors. This office has taken a number of steps to hold individuals accountable for serious offenses in our community, including the following. Number one, prioritizing the screening and prosecution of violent crimes like homicides, all shootings, whether someone dies or not, armed robberies, and carjackings. The publicly available adult case screening dashboard on our website provides all of this information so that the public can check it for themselves. For adults, in the last 9 months, this administration has accepted 95% of murder and attempted murder cases, 100% of manslaughter cases, 77% of all robbery cases, and 70% of all car theft cases. But that still only includes the 35% and 8% that the NOPD is actually making arrests for. Now, the reason that we've been able to accept 95, 100, and 77% of these violent crime cases is because we reformed this office so that we can make smart decisions and not waste our time and resources just padding the numbers by accepting and prosecuting simple possession of drug cases and other minor offenses that do not affect our safety. Number two, holding carjackers specifically accountable. We're holding carjackers accountable by prosecuting these offenses not just as carjacking, but as armed robberies. And we do this because this increases the maximum sentences in jail terms. Between January and October 2021, 237 carjacking automotive theft cases were instituted by this office. 38 of those were committed by adults, 199 were committed by juveniles. Now, to increase the accountability measures for the folks that are terrorizing our families by carjackings, I have instructed adult and juvenile trials divisions to charge all appropriate carjacking cases as armed robberies. Now, when we do this, this increases the maximum sentence under the law. Under Louisiana law, the adult prosecuted for carjacking faces 2 to 20 years in prison. The overwhelming majority of carjackings in Orleans Parish involve a gun. By adding armed robbery charges to these appropriate carjacking cases, now the offender is facing 10 to 99 years in prison. To aid in this process, we will request that the NOPD arrest and charge carjackings, but book them as armed robberies so that there can be more accountability where it is appropriate on the front end. Number three, we are utilizing and will continue to utilize a firearm sentencing provision to ensure that there are mandatory minimum sentence requirements for any and all gun crimes. When these carjackings and violent crimes begin to surge in 2021, the lawyers in my office were instructed to utilize a firearm sentencing provision to invoke that minimum mandatory sentence. That's a big deal. That's an add-on. That's an extra set of years in addition to the other charge. We have and we will continue to push for Gwynn's Law hearings in domestic violence cases, and this will allow a more informed bail hearing for DV cases. We're also going to expand these Gwynn Law hearings to non-DV cases as well, any cases involving victims where safety is a concern. Prosecuting domestic violence cases are very difficult, but it is something we're working to deliver on, and we thank the City Council for recognizing the importance of this work. We will continue to push for these Gwynn laws hearing in magistrate court and at every setting. Number 5, we have been and we will continue to secure grand jury indictments in this room. This is where the grand jury convenes. Citizens come, they sit in this space here, and they have to hear from the police department and witnesses and hear evidence. We also have instituted a new thing, which is a special grand jury, which is how we were able to solve the Thomas Rolfe's case, which meets on another day, in which we're trying to connect the dots between serial crimes that have occurred throughout this city by repeat offenders. Despite sustained challenges last year from the pandemic and hurricane-induced court closures, we have not wavered and will not waver on our commitment to hold people accountable. In this room, in 2021, the DA's office obtained 58 grand jury indictments for violent crimes committed in this city, thanks to the help of citizens of this community. Number 6, securing guilty pleas during COVID-19 court closures. It is true, this job is exponentially harder to do without jury trials and with courts being closed, which means the more evidence we have, the more robust partnership we have with the NOPD, the more guilty pleas we can get when there are no jury trials. In 2021, the DA's office secured guilty pleas in over 1,700 cases and 3,000 charges resulting in guilty pleas from the work that we have been doing. This work can be strengthened and needs to be strengthened with other resources so that we can increase DNA testing, get it out faster, and secure faster guilty pleas when DNA links a perpetrator to a crime. Solving cold cases with limited resources. We began a cold case unit in August, part and parcel due to the solve rate that has existed in this city for a very long time. When you've got less than 30% of the homicide cases where no one is arrested or ever detained, that means close to 70% of the murder cases in this city have grown cold and victims' families have no answers. This is part of why in August we started this cold case unit. And with no additional resources from the city or the federal government, we were able to close a 5.5-year-old case. It is important to realize that when we talk about cold cases, these are not one-offs. Many of the people who have committed homicides in the past are still, 70%, based on the FBI number, are still in the street, left to reoffend and commit repeat offenses. So, as you can see, despite the public chatter and the very unnecessary finger pointing, we are working very hard in putting forward strategies to hold folks accountable. We've been doing it for the past 12 months. Now, some of you may remember that we started 2021 with the surge, and people in the East, in the Uptown area, were rightfully outraged and they wanted solutions. So at that time, I recommended and worked with Chief Ferguson's team to design the Serial Crimes Prevention and Prosecution Task Force. That utilized top deputies from the NOPD and the DA's office, and we worked together to design an initiative at my direction. The chief agreed with this work. However, since that agreement and since we put that CEA together, despite their public comments to the media in April saying that this was a good idea and this would be an excellent way to deal with the surge of carjackings and gang-related crimes, the NOPD still has not signed this CEA to actually begin this strategy in earnest. That's the partnership we need. This needs to be signed, and we need them to follow through with their commitment to partner to tackle serial crimes like carjackings and shootings. These aren't one-offs. The carjacking that occurred on Constant Street was the first of a series of events that culminated with someone firing bullets at the car and sending a bullet through the headrest of a private citizen who was picking up food for her family. We've got to be connecting the dots between these different crimes. And this Serial Crimes Initiative, when it's signed, will help us do that better. You may also remember that going back to the past DA's administration, the DA, the NOPD, and other law enforcement agencies worked together to prosecute a serious group of violent crimes as part of a multi-agency gang unit. I met with the chief my first weeks in office, one of the first meetings we had in January, and we recommitted to this initiative. The chief committed as well. We still do not have a new CEA or funding that the NOPD promised in that agreement, although the ADA in my office, who has been assigned, has continued to work on that unit, but without the other resources, without the unit, without other ADAs and trial assistants and investigators. So these are two unfunded initiatives that could have and should have properly surged back at the crime surge that we're dealing with right now. And this is not about this office having the best ideas or only relying on our ideas. We welcome any strategies from any other agencies in the criminal legal system or City Hall to deal with this surge that we're dealing with right now. And if they have other plans or better plans, I stand ready to hear any alternative plans about how we can work together to collectively deal with this unprecedented crime spike. To be abundantly clear, we are, this entire office is so very grateful to the hardworking men and women of the NOPD. And we realize the challenges that they have been up against. We realize the woman power and manpower shortages. We realize the challenges of navigating the consent decree, the challenges of class size, the challenges of recruitment. What's going on right now has nothing to do with the rank and file officers or much of the leadership of NOPD. They know all of this to be true. They understand the critical importance of the solve rate. They understand the critical importance of the gang unit, of the task force. They know it worked. They know the CA is not signed. My staff, the folks on the other floors of this office, the folks over in court, worked every day with rank and file police officers, with detectives. Our screening ADAs are back and forth with officers working to build better investigations after a report has been filed daily. The trials ADAs work with them to find evidence and increase that evidence as they get closer and closer to trial. We have even had NOPD officers testify in this room to help us build better prosecutions. The challenges we are facing right now in this critical moment are leadership challenges. This is a leadership crisis. There is absolutely a surge of violent crime in this community, which means that leaders, criminal justice stakeholders, city officials, we need to be collectively surging back with strategies, not blaming someone else, especially when every other major city is dealing with the exact same thing. Sociologists predicted that these crimes would spike. at the beginning of this pandemic. If the pandemic persisted, they made it very clear that certain crimes would increase, which is why we came up with the Serial Crimes Initiative as these crimes begin to spike. This is what we know. People of this city do not want to see leaders bicker. The people of this city do not and are not interested in a blame game, and neither am I, which is why I tend not to respond to you guys when you say the chief just said there's no accountability in court. What do you say about that? I haven't responded. But we're at a critical juncture. We have federal dollars that have been delivered to the city to appropriately respond to this COVID-19 crisis. We have carjacking surging, we have armed robbery surging, and we have homicide surging. Do you know how much new money we put into combating these things in the DA's office and the police department? None. We have the same funding for trials and screening that we had before this unprecedented surge. And if we're going to save our city, we have to invest in the people that are fighting to combat this surge, in this office and in the NOPD. So I am committed, and I will recommit to work with the chief, just as we work with the rank and file officers every day to move cases forward. And I am committed to working collectively to come up with real solutions that can properly address this surge. My office is committed to the people of this city and committed to the city council. I'll be with them on Monday to discuss other strategies that I think we can put forward that can help us make this community safer than it is right now. You know, Sherman, is it finger pointing to state what the actual solve rate is in this community? Or is that a fact? Is it finger pointing to say that the CEA that would fund a targeted strike force designed to deal with carjackings that we put together over a year ago has still not been signed by the NOPD? Is that finger pointing or is that a fact? Is the fact that there was a multi-agency gang task force to deal with gang violence that existed under the last administration that has gone unfunded during my administration, is that finger pointing or is that a fact? So number one, what I said to you was the way to combat violent crime is to arrest more of the perpetrators that are committing these crimes. If we convict all 30% of the arrests that are made for the 100% of calls for service from citizens who are victimized, that means 70% of the folks that are committing armed robberies and murders and carjackings are still walking around our street. And 90% of the folks that are committing car thefts are still walking around on our street. I would challenge you, Natasha, to give me the name of the individual who was arrested on a Monday and who was out on a Monday. What that is fear-mongering. That is not occurring. I don't understand your question, JD.
The idea of
I don't think your question is really referring to two separate parts of what happens in the process. One, you've got when an individual is arrested, and if it's not treason or first-degree murder, a judge will set a bond, right? What that judge sets the bond at is based upon the evidence that is presented before that judge. The district attorney's office by law does not set bond. We do not have the power and authority to say to a defendant, this is your bond and you pay that to the DA's office. That's not the way the system is set up. The system is set up that a court decides what a bond amount will be. Now, whether or not that person makes that bond or not, we don't control that. We can't control what that person's resources are and what they're able to find and whether or not they own property that can post that bond. That is outside of the power of the district attorney's office. Now, we talk about evidence. Evidence is necessary in court to bring a case successfully before an Orleans Parish jury or any jury in any city in this country. Evidence, testimony, that's required. Now, certainly, if jury trials are suspended, that limits the number of cases that can go to trial, which means, JD, that there's going to be a backlog and an increased number of cases that have to be dealt with in 2021 and 2020, all at the same time, with just still 12 sections of court to work in. And what that also speaks to is the need for more resources for the DA's office in terms of victim witness support to keep witnesses and victims engaged in the system during court closures, during jury trial suspensions, so that they have the resources they need so they can come forward and testify in court when jury trials commence. I hope that answers your question. And we are exactly that's what we use the evidence for. We are presenting the evidence that this is the right person that committed this crime, and we articulate the dangerousness that we perceive of this individual to the magistrate so that he can set a bond that is appropriately high to keep this person detained so that they are not back on the street reoffending. That's what I mean when I say we present the evidence. And the evidence is of dangerousness, whether or not they've committed offenses in the past, whether or not a gun was involved, whether or not a gun was fired. We present all of that to make sure that there's an appropriate bond in court.
As you look out into the city as somebody who loves the city, how does it land with the fact that so many of these citizens are walking around every day in fear of their life and their property?
JD, we all are. I have to get gas, right? My head's on a swivel when I get out to get gas. If my mother or my wife or anybody in my family is out late, I am nervous about what could happen. I am as fed up as every other citizen is in this community. And I'm even more fed up when I hear that that there is a finger pointing or blame suggesting that someone is arrested on a Monday and out on a Monday. That hasn't happened. It's a false narrative. And it does not serve the people of this community. The people of this community deserve to be safe and want to be safe. Playing with the numbers, suggesting that we are, and Natasha said it a minute ago, she actually quoted the chief, we're making arrests. How many? What is the percentage of cases that are being solved in this community? If we're only solving a small percentage of them, only making arrests on a small percentage of them, then of course crime is going to surge, which is why I brought that up. I didn't bring it up to create an argument. I brought it up so that we could work together to find solutions to this issue. I mean, I wholly expected the chief and I to be able to go hand in hand with the courts, to the city council and the mayor, and to say these federal dollars need to be used right now in January of 2022 to save our city. If we don't invest in surging back against violent crime as a collective, as a partnership, we won't have any citizens or city to spend money on 2 years from now. We are at a unique precipice of a very volatile, dangerous situation for a destination city, right? Nobody's going to come here when crime is surging, and people who are living here, working here, and paying taxes here are going to begin to leave. You have to ask yourself, as a parent, am I responsible for living in the city of New Orleans when you get shots fired at you, picking up food for your kids, or getting gas, or coming home from school? I mean, young Dylan lost her life riding in the back of a car with her mother. So we don't need finger pointing, but we do need honesty. We need to be honest about what we're dealing with here. We need to be honest about our solve rate. And we need to figure out ways collectively to increase that solve rate together. And when carjackings are surging, we need to surge back on carjacking specifically with a strategy like the Serial Crimes Initiative or the Gang Task Force. Those things are still on the table.